always very clear until I get up here, and then it gets foggier. I would like to segue off the question that was just asked. When you speak to us as Abraham, you always say we, which leads me to believe, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that it's not just one stream of consciousness, but when we transition from the physical to the non-physical, it almost strikes me as though we do not leave this and then go into one individual stream of consciousness and we just kind of lose ourselves in that stream, but that we are able to maintain some semblance of individuality or individual consciousness.
Certainly. Even
in the non-physical.
Certainly.
And that is correct?
Yes. We refer to ourselves as we because we are what could be called a collective consciousness. It's different from a group of you sitting around and chatting around a boardroom table, in the sense that because we are not physical, because we are thought energy, because we do not use words, we just hold knowing. The conversations, therefore, that we have are of a meshing of vibration and an amplification of the knowing. So the advantage of any group of consciousness is that it brings a variety of vantage points into the conversation. It just gives more depth and breadth to whatever subject that you are chewing on. It's a little tricky to try to describe accurately non-physical to someone who's interpreting everything through a physical format, because to make it make sense, you have to make it something like something you know. And so there's always a distortion as we try to describe ourselves. And we have been happy in the years that we've been flowing through Esther, that because she did not have a basis of vocabulary, she put a collection of words together that has given you the clearest depiction of that which we are. You may have heard this story, but we think it answers your question more clearly than any other that we might give you. Esther, early on in her experience with us, one night while lying in a dark bedroom, Jerry was asleep, Esther said, "Abraham, I want to see you." And we said, "We don't think you really do, because every time you think you might, you close your eyes very tight for fear you will." And Esther laughed because she acknowledged she was having a new and wonderful experience with us, and she didn't want anything weird to happen that would freak her out. And so she didn't want some odd face to appear hovering over her bed, some disembodied something or other. And so we said to Esther, "Open your eyes." And Esther opened her eyes in this very dark bedroom and saw, in her description, a room full of fireflies, what looked like millions of them, more than she could count, very definite points of light moving around the room. And then all of these points of light gathered together in one corner of the room, and the light was so bright Esther could not look into it. And then this bright light dispersed into several not so bright lights, but far fewer than the millions of fireflies that she'd seen earlier. And she lay there and smiled, because she had interpreted us as we had intended to be interpreted, as energy, as consciousness. In other words, not as a man, not as an alien, as consciousness. And so that helped her to then understand what she was experiencing with us, because sometimes when she would ask a question that she had mild interest in understanding, she could feel that a mild interested group gathered to chat with her. She could feel when Jerry was asking one of his lifelong questions that he'd carried around with him since he was a very small boy, she could feel the intensity of the group that gathered. She could tell when someone wanted to know if their dog was going to have 5 puppies or 6, that we weren't all that interested in that conversation. In other words, she could feel a difference in, and she also began then to understand that The label of Abraham is just a descriptive label that gives you something to focus upon, but that actually what she was tapping into could better be described as infinite intelligence, because it is as deep and as wide, as broad and as knowing as the questioner can receive.
So